The mansion pulsed with life as the party reached its peak. Guests laughed and mingled beneath the ambient glow of expensive lighting, champagne glasses glittering in their hands. But John Legend and Chrissy Teigen knew that the real excitement lay beyond the main floor, where only a chosen few were allowed. They had heard whispers of Diddy's infamous Essence Room, a private chamber reserved for his closest inner circle and his darkest indulgences. Tonight, Diddy had personally invited them to experience it. Diddy, dressed in a sleek, tailored suit, leaned against the grand staircase, a smug smile spreading across his face as he scanned the room. He gave John a subtle nod, signaling that it was time to clear out the uninvited. John exchanged a glance with Chrissy, then turned to address the crowd with a warm, charming smile. "Folks, it's been an amazing night," he announced, raising his glass. "But for a few of us, the night is only just beginning." Some guests chuckled and lifted their glasses in return, while others exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the hidden meaning beneath John's words. Chrissy moved through the room, gently but firmly guiding several guests toward the exits. Her polite smile belied the finality of her gestures. A few murmured in protest, but Diddy's reputation alone was enough to keep them from asking questions. One by one, the guests filtered out until the main hall stood empty, leaving only Diddy, John, and Chrissy behind. Once the last stragglers were gone, Diddy's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling excitement. "Now," he murmured, his voice smooth as silk, "the real party can begin." He gestured for John and Chrissy to follow, leading them down a narrow, dimly lit hallway far removed from the lively music and chatter. The walls were lined with dark, heavy curtains that seemed to absorb every sound, plunging the corridor into eerie silence. John felt a flicker of unease as they walked, his instincts urging him to turn back. But Chrissy's excitement was contagious. She squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Come on, babe," she whispered. "We've heard so much about this. Let's see what Diddy's been hiding." At the end of the hall stood a large black door, its brass handle gleaming beneath flickering candlelight. Diddy paused, glanced over his shoulder with a knowing smirk, then opened the door and gestured for them to step inside. The room beyond was dim and intimate. Dark red velvet draped the walls, and a single leather armchair sat at the center beneath a soft spotlight. Seated in the chair was a young rapper known for his swagger and raw talent, the latest sensation to rise within Diddy's orbit. He shifted nervously, fidgeting as though he sensed he was somewhere he shouldn't be. When he noticed John and Chrissy, he offered a small, uncertain smile, silently hoping for reassurance. Diddy strode forward, to the rapper, placing a hand on his shoulder in a way that felt both comforting and possessive. "Relax, kid," Diddy said in a low, calming voice. "You're here to experience something special, something transcendent." The rapper forced a nervous chuckle, his wide eyes darting around the room. "I mean, yeah, if you say so, man. This is just different, you know?" Chrissy leaned closer to John, a glimmer of excitement shining in her eyes. "Isn't this thrilling?" she whispered, seeing this side of things. "I've always wanted to know what Diddy's real parties are like." John nodded, though a gnawing sense of dread crept up his spine. His gaze fixed on Diddy's hand as it tightened around the rapper's shoulder, fingers digging into the young man's skin with an intensity that felt almost unnatural. "Tonight," Diddy murmured, his voice barely above a whisper yet heavy enough to fill the room, "you'll understand what it truly means to be great." The rapper's eyes flickered with confusion, but Diddy's gaze held him captive, an unseen force pinning him in place. Slowly, a strange dark mist began to seep from Diddy's hand. It swirled around his fingers, curling toward the rapper. The mist moved as if alive, wrapping itself around the young man like smoky tendrils. He gasped, his body tensing as the mist began to seep into his skin. What's happening?" he stammered, his voice faint, barely audible. John's breath hitched, his pulse racing as he watched the rapper struggle. The young man's skin grew pale, his eyes losing their spark as his vitality seemed to drain away, pulled into Diddy like water spiraling into a vortex. Diddy's face contorted in ecstasy, his eyes half closed, his expression twisted with satisfaction as he absorbed the rapper's essence, his very life force. Beside him, Chrissy watched with an intensity that made John shiver. Her breathing quickened, her eyes bright with fascination as she took in every detail. Utterly entranced by the spectacle, she turned to John, her voice a breathy whisper. "Do you feel it?" she murmured, never taking her eyes off Diddy. "That power, that thrill. Isn't it incredible?" John looked at her, struggling to process the dark excitement reflected in her face. His instincts screamed at him to run, to pull away. but Chrissy's hand tightened around his, holding him in place. Her eyes sparkled, urging him to watch, to surrender to the twisted allure unfolding before them. The rapper's body finally slumped, his face slack and empty as the last trace of his essence flowed into Diddy. Diddy straightened, releasing his grip. The young man collapsed into the chair, now little more than a lifeless shell. The dark mist dissipated, leaving the air thick and heavy. With an unholy energy that draped the room like a shroud, Diddy turned to John and Chrissy, his face calm, almost serene, as if he had just taken part in something sacred. He met John's gaze, his eyes glinting with dark, predatory satisfaction. "Power," he said softly, his voice carrying an intensity that resonated deep within the room. John's chest tightened. "Real power isn't about money or fame," Diddy said calmly. "It's about taking what you want and making it yours." Chrissy shivered beside John, leaning into him, her eyes shining with dark excitement. John felt the pull of it, the seductive allure of control, that raw, overwhelming power. Part of him wanted to turn away, to leave and never look back, but Chrissy's presence anchored him, her fascination feeding his own, curiosity and drawing him deeper into the darkness. Diddy stepped closer, his gaze locking onto John, reading his hesitation, sensing the shift within him. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked, his voice hypnotic. "The rush, the thrill of consuming someone else's energy, their essence. It's like nothing else." John swallowed, his throat dry. He couldn't deny the strange pull he felt, the magnetic allure of the power he had just witnessed. Slowly, almost against his will, he nodded, the last traces of resistance fading from his eyes. Beside him, Chrissy's smile widened. Her hand remained tightly wrapped around his, her eyes filled with satisfaction. She leaned in close, her voice a low, sultry whisper in his ear. "Now you understand," she murmured, her tone laced with excitement. "This is the real party, John. We're in it now." Diddy's grin widened as his gaze shifted between them, pleased with what he saw. He gestured toward the empty shell of the young rapper slumped in the chair. "There are more like him," Diddy said softly, ominously, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "And now, we're just getting started." As the weight of his words settled over John, he felt himself slipping deeper into this world, drawn into the intoxicating darkness he had once feared, but now found irresistible. And with Chrissy by his side, he knew there was no turning back. The Essence Room had claimed him, just as it had claimed so many before. Jenna couldn't believe her luck. She and her best friend Rhea had just been invited to Diddy's party. New to LA, they were two Instagram models trying to make it big. They had heard whispers about these parties, the kind only the biggest celebrities got into, the ones that felt more like a secret club than a regular event. They arrived at the mansion late at night, eyes wide as they took in the towering gates and sprawling grounds. Everything looked luxurious, too perfect to be real. As they stepped out of the car, a valet greeted them, checked their names, and waved them inside. "Can you believe this?" Rhea whispered, barely containing her excitement. "This is it, Jenna. We're finally here." Jenna nodded and smiled, but she couldn't shake the strange feeling in her stomach. The mansion felt too big, too empty. Despite the crowd inside, the music was low, more like a heartbeat than actual songs. And there was something in the air that made her shiver. She had expected wild lights and people dancing, but instead the guests were scattered, watching one another more than enjoying the party. Jenna tried to brush off her nerves. It was Diddy's party after all, and she was determined to enjoy it. She and Rhea began to mingle, moving from room to room. From room to room, trying to catch the eye of anyone who might help them break into the industry. Halfway through the night, a tall man in a black suit approached them. "Diddy would like you to join him in the VIP room," he said quietly. Jenna's heart skipped a beat. She glanced at Rhea, who looked equally shocked but thrilled. This was their chance. They followed the man down a long, dimly lit hallway, passing several closed doors. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, until the music and laughter were nothing more than faint echoes behind them. Jenna's earlier excitement began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The man stopped in front of a heavy wooden door and opened it, nodding for them to enter. The room was dark, velvet curtains lining the walls. A large round table sat at the center. Seated there was Diddy himself, along with an E-list actor. Jenna recognized immediately, someone whose face had once been plastered across magazine covers. He looked at them with a strange, unreadable expression. "Come in, ladies," Diddy said, gesturing toward two empty seats. His voice was smooth, but it carried a weight Jenna couldn't ignore. She noticed he wasn't smiling. They sat down, glancing nervously at each other as Diddy and the actor watched them in silence, intense, unblinking. There was something wrong with their expressions, as if they were studying Jenna and Rhea, sizing them up. "So," Diddy finally said, breaking the silence, "you two want to be part of this world?" Rhea nodded eagerly. "Yes, absolutely. We've been working so hard. We're just looking for an opportunity." Diddy smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know this business isn't just about looks or talent," he said calmly. "It's about commitment, sacrifice." He glanced at the actor, who gave a slow, knowing nod. Jenna's mouth went dry, her heart pounding. She'd heard stories about the lengths people went to in Hollywood, but this felt different, darker. "What kind of sacrifice?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Diddy leaned forward, his gaze locking onto her. "The kind that shows you're willing to give yourself completely to this life," he said. "Not everyone can handle it." He paused, then glanced at Rhea. "But you might be different." Jenna's stomach turned as a heavy feeling settled over her. He wasn't joking. Diddy's eyes held a strange intensity, as if daring them to go further. Sensing an opportunity, Rhea spoke up. "I'm ready for whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady. Jenna shot her a worried look, but Rhea ignored it. Her gaze locked on Diddy and the actor. The actor smiled, a strange, unsettling smile, and stood, moving behind Rhea's chair. "Well then," he murmured, his hands resting on Rhea's shoulders. "Let's begin." Before Jenna could react, the lights in the room dimmed even further. The shadows seemed to creep inward, crawling along the walls. The air grew heavy, like a storm about to break. Jenna tried to stand, but her legs felt weak, her mind foggy. She turned toward Rhea, who sat perfectly still, her eyes unfocused, as if trapped in a trance. "Rhea," Jenna whispered, her voice shaking. But Rhea didn't respond. Her eyes were wide and unfocused, as if she were staring at something only she could see. Diddy's voice cut through the silence. "Hollywood life is more than fame, more than fortune," he said softly, his gaze fixed on Rhea. "It requires a deeper commitment, one that very few understand." The man standing behind Rhea leaned down, his mouth close to her ear. Jenna saw his lips move, murmuring something she couldn't hear. Something that caused Rhea's expression to go completely blank. Rhea's face drained of color. Her breathing grew shallow as the room seemed to darken even further. Jenna wanted to scream, to pull her friend out of the chair, but she was frozen, unable to move, trapped by the crushing weight of the room. And by the way, Diddy and the man stared at Rhea, as if she were some kind of prize. She tried to reach out, but her hand wouldn't obey her. Her fingers felt numb, disconnected. The man's hand slid from Rhea's shoulders to her neck, pressing lightly. Then Jenna saw it, a strange, dark mist rising from his fingers, curling around Rhea's face. The mist was thick and oily, moving with a life of its own. Rhea's eyes fluttered shut. Her body slumped, as if her very essence were being drained from her. "Rhea," Jenna managed to choke out, her voice weak. There was no response. The mist continued to seep from the man's hands, wrapping around Rhea, consuming her. Jenna could only watch, helpless, horrified, as Rhea's skin grew paler, her body sagging in the chair, her life slipping away. Diddy's gaze shifted to Jenna. A faint smile touched his lips. "She wanted it," he said softly, as if explaining something simple. "And in this world, you don't get to ask questions. You just accept." The man turned to Jenna and gave her a strange, hollow smile. "Welcome to Hollywood," he whispered, his words barely audible. The room grew colder. The shadows closed in as Jenna's vision blurred, her mind filled with the image of her friend, lifeless and empty in the chair beside her. She realized it too late. They hadn't been invited here as guests. They were sacrifices to something she couldn't understand. As her world faded into darkness, Jenna understood one final, horrifying truth. Some parties in Hollywood were meant to take far more than they ever gave. And tonight, she and Rhea had given everything. It was a miracle that Ben had even gotten into Diddy's birthday party. The event was strictly invite-only, packed with celebrities, industry elites, and the most influential people in Hollywood. For weeks, Ben had tried every connection he had to secure an invitation. But each lead had ended in a dead end, until his girlfriend, Eleni, came through. Eleni was an assistant to Diddy's personal assistant, a position that barely granted her access to Diddy himself. Still, she'd managed to get Ben a pass. Ben was an independent journalist with a reputation for hard-hitting stories about the entertainment industry's darker side. He'd published exposés on corruption, fame, and abuse in Hollywood, each one earning him new enemies and quiet warnings. The idea of attending Diddy's infamous birthday party was too good to pass up. especially with the stories that circled about what really went on at these events. "This is it, Ben," Eleni had told him, handing over the glossy invitation. "You're going to be in the same room as some of the biggest names in Hollywood. It's your chance to see the truth up close." Ben had been skeptical. Eleni had never fully understood his drive to uncover the twisted underbelly of Hollywood, or why he seemed obsessed with every new scandal and rumor. But she'd been persistent, urging him to go, even if only for the experience. She encouraged him, reassured him, and in the end, he gave in. She had always been a grounding presence in his life, her belief in him calming his nerves. And tonight, she was his ticket to everything he'd been chasing. The mansion loomed over them as they arrived, its towering, shadowy form a testament to wealth and power. Ben could feel the history embedded in its walls, a place where countless secrets had been whispered and buried. The entire property was cloaked in a strange, almost sacred atmosphere, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into a space where reality and myth blurred together. Inside, the party was in full swing. Guests milled about in designer suits and gowns, each face more famous than the last. Ben spotted actors, musicians, and influencers among the crowd, all mingling as if they were the only people who mattered. The rooms were decorated in black and gold. Champagne flowed freely, and soft music pulsed in the background. It was elegant, upscale, and deeply unsettling. "This is incredible," Ben whispered to Eleni as they moved through the crowd. "I don't know how you managed this." Eleni just smiled, her eyes glittering beneath the low lights. "You wanted to be here, right?" she said softly. "Consider it a gift." Ben tried to relax, letting the buzz of excitement wash over him as he took in the scene. Every corner of the mansion seemed to hum with secrets, hidden beneath layers of luxury and charm. There was an unmistakable sense of anticipation in the air, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. Ben felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, peering into the darkness below. As he and Eleni continued to mingle, he noticed something odd. Several guests glanced his way, studying him with curious expressions before turning back to their conversations. A few exchanged knowing looks, subtle nods passing between them as he walked by. A chill crept up his spine. He was just a journalist. There was no reason anyone here should recognize him, especially not Hollywood royalty. As the evening stretched on, Ben began to notice a pattern. Every so often, small groups of guests would quietly slip away, disappearing down a hallway or through an unmarked door. The longer he watched, the clearer it became. They weren't sneaking off to avoid the crowd. They were going somewhere, together, with purpose. Ben's instincts flared with curiosity and suspicion. Something was happening beneath the surface of this party, something carefully hidden, something he hadn't been meant to see. "Eleni?" Eleni seemed to sense his unease. She rested a hand on his arm, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Relax," she murmured. "You're here to have fun, remember?" Before Ben could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. The soft music faded, and all eyes turned toward the entrance. Diddy stepped into the room. He was dressed in an immaculate black suit, moving with the effortless confidence of someone who didn't just own the room but everyone in it. His gaze swept across the crowd, sharp and calculating, a predatory glint flickering in his eyes. When his eyes met Ben's, Diddy's lips curved into a faint, knowing smirk. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Diddy said. His voice carried easily through the room, calm, controlled, powerful. "Tonight we celebrate not only a birthday, but the spirit of dedication and loyalty, those who understand what it truly means to make sacrifices to reach the top." The guests erupted into applause. Ben didn't clap. A heavy weight settled in his stomach. He glanced at Eleni, who was smiling, completely at ease, as if nothing about this felt wrong to her. As the night went on, the crowd relaxed again. Laughter and music filled the space. Champagne glasses clinked, but Ben couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Hours passed. He was just beginning to consider slipping away to explore the mansion when Eleni touched his arm again, her eyes bright with excitement. "Come with me," she whispered, taking his hand. "There's something I want to show you." He hesitated, then followed her as she led him through the crowd and down a long, dimly lit hallway, far from the laughter and lights of the party. Closed doors lined the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Ben's curiosity spiked, but the unease gnawing at his gut grew stronger. "Eleni, where are we going?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. "You'll see," she replied, a faint smile on her lips. "You've always wanted to know what goes on behind the scenes, haven't you?" She pushed open a large set of double doors. Inside was a dimly lit lounge, decorated in deep, shadowy tones. At the center of the room, seated in an oversized armchair, was Diddy. His gaze was sharp and focused as he watched them enter. "Ladies and gentlemen," Diddy said smoothly, his smile as sharp as a blade, "our guest of honor." Ben's heart pounded as he glanced around the room. They were alone, the doors closed behind them. Ben felt trapped, yet his curiosity held him in place. "Ben," Diddy said, leaning back with an air of quiet satisfaction, "do you know how many people would kill to be in your place right now?" Ben swallowed, his mouth dry. I'm honored to be here," he managed, his voice trembling slightly. Diddy's smile widened. "Good. It's rare that we get someone who doesn't belong to our world at one of these parties. You're a guest, Ben, but you're also something more." He leaned forward slightly. "Someone with the right kind of curiosity." Ben's heart hammered as he turned to Eleni, searching her face for reassurance. But Eleni's gaze was fixed on Diddy, calm, unreadable. "Eleni," Ben whispered, dread twisting in his gut. "What's going on?" She finally turned to him. Her eyes were cold now, distant, almost unfamiliar. "You wanted to know what it was really like behind the scenes," she said quietly. "Didn't you?" "You, Ben. Well, tonight you'll see everything." Diddy's eyes sparkled with dark amusement as he rose from his chair, his movements slow and deliberate. "Ben," he continued, "you've been watching us, prying into our secrets, writing your little stories. You think you understand power?" Ben took a step back, his mind racing. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. "Eleni, you set me up?" His voice shook with disbelief. Eleni's expression softened, almost sympathetic. "It's what this world demands. Ben, you've spent so long chasing our secrets, but you never understood the cost." Diddy stepped closer, his presence filling the room. Ben felt the air grow colder, the lights dimming as a heavy, unnatural energy seeped into the space. "You thought you were here to observe us," Diddy murmured, his tone almost gentle. "But tonight you're here for something far more personal." Panic surged through Ben. He tried to move, but Eleni's hand tightened around his arm, holding him in place with a strength that startled him. The blood drained from his face. He was trapped. "Please, don't do this," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Eleni's gaze softened again, but there was no warmth in her eyes. "This is the cost of getting too close," she said quietly. "Hollywood doesn't just give its secrets away, Ben. You have to pay for them." Diddy's hand settled on Ben's shoulder, his grip like iron. A wave of cold spread through Ben's body, sinking deep beneath his skin. It felt as though something was draining him, his strength, his energy, his very life, being pulled away as Diddy held him there. Ben's vision blurred. The last thing he saw was Eleni's face, calm, distant, watching as he was drawn into the darkness. In his final moments, Ben understood the terrible truth. He had come looking for a story, but he had been the story all along. Eleni had led him here step by step, and now he was just another sacrifice, another secret buried in Hollywood's shadows, a cautionary tale for anyone who dared to pry too deeply into the darkness.